Hello students. Last time we studied about uveitis anatomy, uvea anatomy in brief and classification of the uveitis. Today we are studying about the anterior uveitis. So we already know that what is anterior uveitis is. It's the inflammation of the iris and the ciliary body. So the anterior part of the uvea is involved. So you know the various causes. It can be a bacterial, it can be viral, it can be protozoal, or it can be immunological. There are various causes are there. So it can be acute, it can be a chronic. It may be associated with suppurative or non-suppurative. It can be a granulomatous or it can be a non-granulomatous. So what are the symptoms the patient comes to you? The main is the pain, redness, photophobia or the blepharospasm, lacrimation and defective vision. So what kind of pain the patient will have? It's very deep-seated, dull aching and throbbing type. It was at the night. Why? Because it mainly the ciliary body which is highly rich in nerves as well as the muscle part which is involved. Whenever there is a contraction or there is a of this muscle, that leads to the lot of pain because of this contraction of the ciliary muscle in the ciliary body. Coming to this redness, the redness is very typical. It is circumcorneal congestion or circumciliary congestion because of inflammation of underlying ciliary body. Whereas in case of conjunctival congestion or in case of the other conjunctivitis, we have more redness in fornix area comparing to this uveitis where you have the more inflammation in the surrounding the cornea which is deepish bluish in color. Next is photophobia, that is patient is phobic to light or he is reluctant to light, and there will be blepharospasm, that is a very forceful contraction of the lids. Why photophobia? Because this iris is also richly supplied with the nerves. Whenever there is a contraction of the ciliary body and the pupillary contraction, that causes the lot of pain. So in response to that, the patient will have a reflex stimulation of this seventh nerve and closure of the eyes, especially to avoid the entry of light into the eyes. Lacrimation again is the reflex phenomena. The defective vision, it may vary from just slight blurring to the marked deterioration of the vision. It may be due to corneal edema, it can be because of aqueous turbidity, because the aqueous becomes haze. Why it becomes haze, we'll study later. And pupillary block, because of this fibrous exudate may cover this pupil completely, and that's why the rays doesn't enter into your eyeball. Or it can be complicated cataract, or it can be a vitreous haze. So as I showed you, these KPs especially gets collected in the inferior part of the cornea, that is we call it as a R strand. Okay, depending upon the type of the disease, the size and the nature of KPs also varies. It can be mutton sized very big type of kippies, it can be a small medium size, it can be a fine shape, or it can be old kippies. So in what conditions you will get all such kind of things? In a chronic and granulomatous type of disease, you will get a larger kippies. We call them as a mutton fat kippies. Whereas in an acute stage or any immunological related state, you will get a fine or medium sized kippies. Over the period of time, when the active state goes and these KPs gets older, I mean there will be healing stage. So the old KPs will be small, crenated or pigmented types. Those we can differentiate from the acute KPs or the fresh KPs where they are fluffy in nature, they are larger in size and they have not a demarcated lines and they are not pigmented. So here you can make out there is a lot of congestion is there more over the surrounding the cornea, And there are pupil, when you look into the pupil, it is irregular in shape because there is a adhesions for, we call them as a synechase, the adhesions of pupillary margin to the anterior surface of lens. It is because of again the proteinaceous material causing adhesions between these two surfaces. So it is a picture of, as I told you, large mutton kippies. These are old healed kippies which are pigmented and more of in the inferior part. Then what are the anterior chamber signs? As I told you, there will be breakage in the blood aqueous barrier. So large amount of the protein material is get leaked into the anterior chamber, and the aqueous becomes turbid. So whatever these particles are seen are called as aqueous flare. We grade them into plus 1, plus 2, plus 3 and plus 4 depending upon the severity. Okay, even the aqueous cells, when the white blood cells gets leaked into the anterior chamber in the very severe cases, so again you can make out the floating of these cells into the anterior chamber. Again you can count by the Tyndall effect, what we call it as a these movement of cells and the flare you can see by the Tyndall effect. What is this Tyndall effect? Whenever you go into the dark and some opening is there from the roof or from the your window, and the light passing through that, the source of light passing through that, the window or that hole, and when you see the movement of the particles, the zigzag movements, the particle in the air, the similar way it is seen in the anterior chamber by the Tyndall effect, that we call it as a Tyndall effect, which can be done by your slit lamp. Okay, then when these cells and the flare settles down in the anterior chamber, it forms a pus that we call it as a hypopyon. So again, it the size varies. It may very thick, and it may cover the entire anterior chamber. Okay, then what are the iris signs? So as we know that the iris is well patterned, you have a crypts and elevated lesions, and it is very spongy structure and highly vascular structure. So whenever it is get inflamed, because this spongy structures, the lot of the edema, that is fluid, gets accumulated in the iris. That's why the pattern of iris is lost. Okay, even the color also changes. Then as it becomes heavy, that's why there will be the contraction of the pupil also gets delayed, or it becomes a sluggish in nature. Hmm. Then iris nodules. What are these iris nodules? In a granulomatous conditions, the accumulation of these inflammatory cells forms nodules. So these may be gets accumulated at the pupillary border, or it may be in the stroma of the iris. So when they get accumulated at the pupillary border, we call them as a Kopis nodules. When they are present in the periphery part of iris, we call them as Basaka nodules. So when accumulation of this proteinaceous material is there at the pupillary border, over the period of time it gets organized because of the fibrin rich the content in that, and leads to adhesions between this posterior surface of the iris and the anterior lens capsules. So those we call it as a posterior synechia. Initially, because of the gravity, it starts in the inferior part, maybe the inferior nasal part. Slowly the anterior margin, the entire margin is involved, and sometimes the entire posterior surface may get adhered to the anterior surface of the lens. We call it as a plastering of the iris on the lens. So here you can make out the pupil is not circular, and there are some adhesions inferiorly, those we call it as the posterior synechia, and inferiorly you can make out a whitish the deposit or the fluid like thing in the anterior chamber, that we call it as the hypopyon. Most of the time it is sterile in nature until and unless it is secondarily infected. Okay. So these are the nodules which are present at the pupillary border. called as Copi's nodules. Whereas Basaka's nodules are the arrow mark, what you see in the first picture, they are in the away from the pupillary margin. Those are called as Basaka nodules. So these are because of aggregation of epithelioid and mononuclear cells. Then coming to the pupillary signs, so as I told you, it becomes very sluggish either because of the edema and because of this the adhesions, and irregular in shape again because of the synechase. Occlusio pupillae. Occlusio pupillae, because of exudate, it may cover the entire pupillary lesions, uh, leads to occlusion of the pupil. Then what are the changes in the lens? So as the lens gets nutrition from the aqueous and the vitreous, as the aqueous is uh, turbid and there is a blood aqueous barrier damage, the lens won't get the nutrition properly. So that's why it leads to the complicated cataract, and then we can see sometimes the pigments and deposits on the interior capsule. IOP, it may varies because these exudates may go and block the trabecular meshwork. That may leads to raise in the IOP in acute rise, or over the period of time there can be a synechase, peripheral synechase because of the exudation, and that leads to the secondary raise in the secondary glaucoma, secondary raise in the IOP. So, or it may be low because there can be ciliary shutdown and leads to hypotony and decrease in the IOP. So it varies, depends upon the stage of your uveitis. Okay. Posterior synechia as already mentioned. So coming to the investigations. What investigation you would like to rule out the disease? As you know, the n number of causes are there for the uveitis. Then we have to go through the various investigations to rule out the different kind of diseases. So simple complete blood count, ESR, blood sugar level, then test for antinuclear antibodies, RH factor is needed. To rule out tuberculosis and the syphilis serological tests are needed. And to rule out HLA related things or the tuberculosis, you need to go for the radiological tests in the form of X-ray, lumbar spine or the sacroiliac joint. Okay. Then some skin tests are there called as the tuberculin test, Kibim test for the sacroiliac and the pathology test. Then coming to the idiopathitis, there are two types. One is non-specific treatment and the specific treatment. Again, in the specific, non-specific treatment, local therapy are there. Then the systemic. Then local therapy, the cycloplegic drugs. Cycloplegic drugs, the drugs which brings about the relaxation of the ciliary body. So they are in the form of the atropine drops or the ointment which is used to BD or the thrice depending upon the severity, or you can use the 2% of foam atropine drops and the cyclopentolate. So what they brings about is, first of all, it releases the spasm of the ciliary muscles and it breaks the synechase which are already formed and maintains the blood aqueous barrier. That's why the leakage is stopped, and that's why the reduction in the exudation. Then coming to the corticosteroids, these are the anti-inflammatory nature. There are various forms. The dexamethasone you can use the betamethasone or the prednisone. You can use it in form of the ointment as well as the drops. Sometimes in the severe case, you can go for the systemic corticosteroids. In systemic therapy, as I told you, the corticosteroids you can use initially prednisolone in 1 milligram per kg body weight, but it is tapered over the period of time. Or you can use the NSAIDs where corticosteroids are contraindicated, especially in case of the diabetes patients, okay, or in case of the immunocompromised patients. And sometimes you can go for the immunosuppressive drugs in very severe cases like methotrexate or the azathioprine or cyclosporine. These are available in the form of the drops. Okay, but it should be, you have to take the fitness and should be monitored by the physician before using these immunosuppressive drugs. Then physical measures like suppository, the treatment in the form of the hot fermentation which increases your blood circulation and dark goggles because to avoid the photophobia. And you have to go for the specific treatment that underlying tuberculosis is there, you have to tuberculosis, syphilis is there, or any other the diseases underlying there, you have to treat it after investigation. Then treatment of